Hi, and welcome to this tutorial series on creating a panorama with PTGui. In this first part, we'd like to tell you about PTGui and what it does, and then we'll show you how to successfully photograph a panorama. In part 2 of this series, we'll show you how to stitch that panorama. PTGui is a panoramic stitching software that was originally written as a GUI, or a graphical user interface for Helmut-Dersch's panorama tools. So the name PTGui is just a simple acronym. Although the software has a simple name, it has many features. It's Mac and Windows compatible. It works with any camera or lens. It can not only stitch single rows of photos, but also multiple rows. It can create partial panoramas, 360-degree panoramas, and fully spherical panoramas. It can stitch hundreds of photos into a very large gigapixel image. And finally, PTGui was designed to work automatically, being easy enough for a beginner, and yet it can give advanced users full control over every parameter. So enough about the software, let's move on to taking the photographs. Photographing a panorama certainly isn't difficult, but for the best results, we recommend following a few guidelines. All the images you take for a single panorama must be taken from a single viewpoint in order to avoid something called parallax. Parallax is an effect where two objects appear to change positions relative to each other when viewed from different viewpoints. For example, here are two images taken at slightly different viewpoints. Now check out this lamppost. You can see its position relative to the background has changed. So this parallax effect is clearly visible even though I only moved the camera a few centimeters. It's this relative movement of objects, caused by parallax, that prevents these images from being properly stitched. PTGui can attempt to align the background object or the foreground object, but not both at the same time. Even worse is that the software might try to align the lamppost, which would end up throwing the other parts of the panorama out of line, resulting in small stitching errors throughout the panorama. So it's really important to avoid parallax. Now, just a bit ago, I mentioned that the images need to be shot from a single viewpoint. But what viewpoint? Well, every lens has a specific viewpoint, which is the so-called entrance pupil. It's also referred to as the no parallax point or nodal point. The exact location of this point differs between lenses, but in general, the viewpoint tends to be very close to the front of the lens. So if I place my camera directly on the tripod and rotate it, you can see that the front of the lens is actually moving. This results in a change of viewpoint, and as we just learned, this will cause stitching problems. So to prevent parallax errors, the camera should rotate around the front of the lens. To do this, we use a panoramic head, which attaches to the top of the tripod and allows the camera to be rotated around the lens. You can still take good panoramas without a panoramic head, as long as you remember to rotate the camera around the front of the lens. When photographing handheld, this means that you rotate yourself around the camera instead of the camera rotating around your body. For landscape panoramas where objects aren't close to the camera, you can actually get good results without a panoramic head. But for indoor panoramas, you'll definitely need a panoramic head since the parallax effect will be much more evident. And here are a few other things to keep in mind for a successful stitch. Assuming that you have a camera that has a manual mode, make sure your exposure is locked by selecting the M mode on your camera. This ensures that all images will be taken with the same exposure settings. And then expose for the highlights, or if it's a high contrast scene, expose for the most important part of the scene. And for those high contrast scenes, you can use PTGui's HDR feature, which you can learn more about on the PTGui website. Unfortunately, a lot of compact cameras don't offer a manual exposure setting, and taking images with these cameras will result in differences in brightness. But the Blender and PTGui will attempt to smooth out these differences as much as possible. And the last point to keep in mind is to lock the white balance. Depending on the light, you can just use your camera's presets. Now we're ready to take some photos. When taking the photos, the order isn't important. PTGui will figure out how they overlap. The amount of overlap isn't critical. Usually a 20% overlap is enough. The next step is to load the images into PTGui and stitch them together. So be sure to check out the tutorial on stitching, and thanks for watching.